Hello again and welcome to our series of Beyond Oil Conversations. Now I need your full attention for the next few minutes because I have an important announcement to make. We are putting on a major online event. Now it's been a pretty logistically challenging with what's been going on in the world right now, but we made it happen because I believe it's one of the most potentially valuable opportunities in the world today too. Now, we've been building up to this announcement behind the scenes for several weeks, and we've been alluding to it in this series of conversations with our editors. Well, now I can pull back the curtain and let you know that we are hosting an online conference later this month, also called Beyond Oil. Now, there are a few really important things to let you know before I tell you how to register. So number one, first of all, is the dates. This will be a 7-day online event starting on Monday, October the 19th. You will get content every single day. We're going to be talking to clean energy and investment experts from all over the world over the course of a week. And we'll stream these talks on an access-only special event website. Now, you can expect roughly 2 pieces of exclusive content a day, but they will be in-depth, richly valuable insights from some of the biggest experts in the world, and I'll tell you a bit more about those in a second. Now, the next thing, I'm absolutely delighted to announce that our Beyond Oil conference, online conference, is free to attend. Now, that's right, there's going to be no charge whatsoever. The only thing we ask is that you register, and I will show you how to do that in just a moment. Now, this is a pretty big deal. Ideally, we'd put this show on here in Melbourne or in another major capital city. We've hosted many of these conferences before, and typically in the past, we charged around $500, even up to $1,000 in some aspects, a seat for a 2-day show, 2 to 3 day show. But because of COVID, we can't do anything like that, obviously. So we've moved everything online. And thanks to the generosity of our speakers and some deft negotiating by our people here and in London, we've just about managed to cover our costs. Now that means you can get access to our Clean Energy Investing Conference for free. Now that's practically unheard of. To be honest, I'm even amazed that we managed to pull it off, but we have. So sit tight because I will let you know how to register in a minute or two's time. Third thing I wanted to do is introduce you to my co-host for the Beyond Oil Conference. His name is Kit Winder, and he's based with our friends in our London office. Now, Kit is an analyst and researcher who works alongside James Allen, who you've already heard from this week in this series. Together, they've been exploring the investment potential of clean energy for almost 2 years from their base on the south bank of the River Thames in London. Now, earlier this year, when I realized that COVID was going to curtail our attempts to put on a big show here in Melbourne, I reached out to Kit and James, who I knew had done a lot of exciting work in this area. They were a great help. They'd already been talking to several of the energy experts we profiled here in Australia, specifically those based in the UK, Europe, and the US. Now, once we secured access to these speakers, Kit volunteered to take the hosting duties. This was mainly because of the 9-hour time difference, and also because at the time, the UK wasn't subject to the same kind of draconian lockdown that we were, especially here in Melbourne. Anyway, Kit has been unbelievably helpful to us. And he joins me right now, live from Zoom, via Zoom from London. Kit, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Good evening to you.
Yeah, so good evening to you. It's evening to me, morning for you. It's a bit weird. Firstly, I just want to just say a big thanks to you for organising and conducting all of the Beyond Oil conference speeches and interviews on your side of the planet. How did you find the experience, mate?
Yeah, well, I mean, I should say it's my absolute pleasure. I mean, for me, it was just sort of a privilege to be speaking to all these people. As you say, the names that we got in were truly extraordinary. I've been following a lot of their work for over a couple of years now, and so it was just great to be able to speak to them in person and ask them all the things that I've wanted to for so long. And they really were just such interesting conversations. But what I found funny was that I hadn't done so much interviewing before, and so I was mainly sat here sort of concentrating on what they were saying and trying to think of what the next question was. So what I really enjoyed doing was, you know, in the week or two afterwards, was going back and watching them all back. And then I found them so much more valuable because I could actually sort of relax and give them my full attention almost. So that was sort of one of the funny things that I found. But basically, as I say, it was just an honor to be able to speak to all of these incredible people. They're such big names from the industry.
Yeah, so I know you've been researching the clean energy investment trend, and especially with its investment potential with James Allen for almost 2 years now. Um, are we right to say that this is likely to facilitate the biggest transfer of wealth in our lifetime? I know that's a very big kind of statement, but perhaps you can just give us your thoughts on that and what it means to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're saying it, and certainly people who tune in will see that our guests are saying it, which I can tell you carries a lot more weight than me throwing my thoughts in the ring. But one of the things you look at is, I like to look at markets in terms of cycles. Things go up and things go down, they grow and they fall. And if you look at energy at the moment as a percentage of the stock markets, if you look at America, for example, in the S&P 500, it's at its lowest ebb. Energy has never formed such a small part of the greater index before. And if you think of renewables, they form such a tiny part of energy as a whole now. It's all the oil majors that are dominating that small sector. So while a lot of people might think that they know about solar and wind and electric vehicles and Tesla's hitting new highs, the truth is that we are so early in this transition. So energy as a whole is a constant in the world. There's no reason why it should fluctuate as a part of, a stock market index, because we are using more and more every year on a global basis. We're going to use more and more electricity in the decades to come. And so the real question from here is, energy is going to find a place once more in the portfolios of investors the world over. But is it going to be green energy, or is it going to be the traditional coal and fossil fuels that we've known? That's what I want to ask my guests about, and I can tell you they give some pretty interesting answers, that's for sure.
So you say this is just the start of a massive global trend. I mean, when you look at the history of this, I mean, just 100 years ago, it was kind of the dawn of the era of oil, really, in terms of how it was used in the car industry and all this kind of thing. And that was like back in the start of the 20th century. And we had like 100 years since then. So, I mean, is that the kind of, and we know what that did. It opened up America, it opened up industry and made globalization possible, really. Is that the same kind of trend that we're looking at now over the next 100 years, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. And you can go a lot further back than that, James. I mean, you can look at energy transitions throughout history. Where you going from, the windmills of the Dutch in the 14th century, moving on to sort of wood. And we didn't transition from wood to coal necessarily because we were running out of coal. We transitioned because we found a better source of energy. And I think that's what we're seeing again today is there is obviously concern, or, 15 years ago, there was concern about what they called peak oil. And back then what peak oil meant was we're going to run out. But now peak oil means an entirely different thing, which is no one's going to want it anymore. And I think the transition just of that terminology is so interesting, is because what we found is that we're finding better sources of electricity. We're finding better ways to power cars. We're finding better ways to drive industry forward. And one of the things that really came out in the talk for me that I found so interesting across every speaker almost was the way in which this is no longer a transition that's being driven by virtue or some moral imperative to save the planet. It's being driven by economics and performance. And that's something we can touch on maybe more today, or what people will hear more about in the talks. But that was something that I found so interesting.
So without giving too much detail away, can you share some of the big wow moments you had with talking with any of our conference experts?
Yeah, I mean,
Sneak peek, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, I mentioned it before, but I mean, the first thing people think of when they think about the energy transition or green energy is, solar power, wind turbines, and electric vehicles. And obviously I had worked on this. This is my job, so I'm aware it's a bit more than that. But the complexity of it all, really, and the way in which every speaker comes at the whole broad picture from an incredibly different angle, with also very different viewpoints that are incredibly well researched and well positioned. I found it so interesting just to see that there is not going to be one straightforward way forward. There are very different ideas of how this transition is going to play out. And also a huge array of subsectors within the energy transition. You can look at things like hydrogen or next generation solar, floating wind turbines, undersea generation. And, in a country like Australia, surrounded by such powerful oceans, it still amazes me that there is not an incredibly economically viable way to harness the great power of the seas. And I think that's something worth looking into a little bit more. And there are companies doing it. But so the complexity of it was one. And then in terms of small things, I think the way in which the transition to electric vehicles ties in with the transition to renewable energy, and how they're almost creating a virtuous loop between the two because they feed off each other, and how it's actually the relationship between those two rather than individually one or the other. It's that relationship that's really going to challenge the supremacy of big oil and their grip on our daily lives. I think that's something that we delve into quite a lot, and I think it's something people will find very interesting, is just the dynamics of that relationship.
How would you say, just from your point of view, is the resistance to that transition? Because I think perhaps here in Australia we're slightly behind the rest of the world, not in terms of where it's going, but I think there's almost more of an opportunity in Australia because it's yet to hit that curve. Have you noticed a gradual change of maybe people's opinions on it or anything like that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you're right. Australia is an interesting one. I mean, if you look at countries by how much renewable electricity they generate, Australia is somewhere around the region of 25th. It's behind countries like Vietnam or Austria. And I guess Australia might like to think that it would quite often be ahead of those in things like technology and futurism and economic advantage. And when you think about the natural assets that Australia has for this transition, so looking purely at renewables, you have a huge amount of space and a huge amount of sun, which are two things we don't have in Britain, but we produce 33% of our electricity by solar and wind. You also have, an entire coastline. So as an island, we in the UK know exactly what that brings in terms of offshore wind opportunities. It's a lot windier out there than it is on land. And the economics, for the first time this year, actually in 2020, we've seen offshore wind being auctioned off for generation without a subsidy. So for the first time, it's happening in 2020. So for islands like ours, like yours and mine, that is a great opportunity. So for Australia, you have all the natural assets you could ask for renewables. It just so happens that you have quite a lot of the old school natural assets as well, and quite a lot of infrastructure to use them. So as you say, you're not, as a country, doing phenomenally well in terms of leading the charge to renewables, but you have all the assets and you're starting to develop a bit of an imperative as well. I think certainly there's a lot of action. I see a lot of small Australian technology companies crossing my path every day in my job researching renewable stocks here in the UK. And it's one of those countries that keeps cropping up as churning out really good, really interesting ideas, really good technologies. And the network of people that we've spoken to over there is very vibrant. So that's something I've definitely found interesting. You've got the assets and you've got the people working on it as well, which is important. Do
you think Australia has a role to facilitate this transition in, that we're well equipped to do that? Because I mean, policymakers are now starting to really put, it's part of the government's policy now to address, have renewable energy as a big role in the economy going forward.
So I think the matchup between, demand from the people and the political response has been important in Australia, and it's especially important in Australia because, of course, I think it was your Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who walked into Parliament with a lump of coal in his hand. I mean, he rode to power on the back of support from the coal industry, and he's going to find that he might have to go back on some of his promises, I would think, if he would like a second term.
Now, obviously, our role in this as a business is to show investors how they might be able to capitalize on this fast-moving trend. And I know for a long time, this subsidy-rich industry hasn't really captured the attention of private investors. Is that starting to change from what you've been saying? Clearly it is.
Yeah, it's changing faster than I ever would have thought. So as I say, I've been working on this now for a couple of years. And the first year of working with James here in the UK, he's brilliant what he does. And so the portfolio did broadly very well. But over the last, I guess, 6 to 9, 12 months, it's just been extraordinary, actually. I've never seen anything like it. And just as much as seeing the way that stock prices and markets are behaving in terms of, what's happening to old school oil and gas assets, compared to new renewable technologies, clean technologies and new energies. The market prices will tell you a lot of the story. But the side that you maybe don't see is the amount of emails I'm getting from readers here in the UK and from investors in the UK who are looking for ways into this, or they're saying, I've never looked at this before, how do I get into it? Or where should I start in terms of learning more about the energy transition? But that's not to say there also aren't a huge number of people who are very, very well versed in all of this. And they're writing to me saying, have you seen this brilliant small little company? Or this is an incredible new technology that I've just spotted in Canada. And, you know, the level of interest, I don't get feedback on any other topic the same way I do for the energy transition. So clearly, retail investors and, you know, the private investors are really, really hot onto it. But the interesting thing is that there are very few institutional funds, mainly because the companies in the renewable sector are currently too small. They're too new. And so the opportunity for us is incredible, because it's very rare that you get a sector where the most exciting companies with the best technologies that are going to have a brilliant decade or 2 decades have no coverage by analysts at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. It's genuinely, such a rare occurrence that retail investors really get the first bite of the apple. And that is both a pleasure to see and a very lucrative thing to see as well.
Yeah, I guess also that it's actually, you say there's no coverage, but what there is for sure is capital moving in to this sector. It's not just subsidies from government. I think we discussed this with James in the past. There's actual investors, professional investors, capital and institutional money flooding into this market as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I was saying what I was saying, this was more, I guess, in the last year or two. And for the first time now, you know, in 2020, we're seeing the institutions wake up a little bit. So there aren't so many formal funds, but you're starting to see big names cropping up on, you know, the investor sheets of the companies that we're looking at for the first time. A year and a half ago, that was never true. And it is very noticeable. A few companies that we've looked at this year, a big hedge fund or a big bank will invest in one of our companies and it will start doing really, really brilliantly. Because actually a company with a market capitalization of 50 to 100, 200 million pounds or a few $100 million over your way, when institutional money gets involved, it can sort of double the share capital that's looking at a stock quite quickly. And obviously the power that goes with that is very profound. So the arrival of institutions is a huge opportunity, but retail investors have to get in before them for that to take hold as an advantage.
Okay, Kit. Well, I'm going to let you go now. I'm going to leave it there. We've got lots of interviews to get through and lots of content to come in the coming days. So we'll see you back on October the 19th for day 1 of the Beyond Oil conference. Do you have any final messages do you have a final message for our viewers before you head off?
I suppose all I'd say is just enjoy it. I mean, there's such interesting people to hear from. I had such a great time talking to them. So just go into it, whatever your preconceptions are, with a hugely open mind, because it's not all, you know, bullish renewables and green energy. There's a very balanced argument to all of this, and there's a role to play for everything. But yeah, just relax and enjoy it. It's such a fascinating topic at the very least. So yeah, I just hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Great. Thanks again, Kit. And I look forward to seeing you during the show now that it's all announced, and I can't wait to get into it. Cheers.
Indeed. Cheers, James. Great to chat to you.
Cool. Okay, so if you want to attend our Beyond Oil online investment conference for free, you need to click on the link below this video. That will take you to a secure registration page where you'll be able to find out more about the speakers who are lined up to talk to, all of the content you're going to get, plus details of a very special keynote event where you're going to get our best ideas for investing in this once in a generation megatrend. All the details are on the next page. Plus, for a limited time, you'll be able to register for a free ticket. So don't delay. Go ahead and click that link below now for them to register for free. As far as I know, this is the only conference of its kind being put on in Australia in 2020. And by that, I mean the only clean energy event aimed squarely at investors and the investment opportunities it presents. So if that excites you, click on the link below the video and below this screen and get your free ticket to our Beyond Oil online conference starting on Monday, October 19th. I'll be back again tomorrow with another Beyond Oil conversation. This one's with Shay Russell and Lachlan Tierney, and we're going to be talking about if and where nuclear power fits into Australia's clean energy future. I'll see you then.